The Rose Dragon archetype is a series of dragon monsters used by Akiza Azinski in the Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds anime. Although some of its members have existed for a time, no proper supports were given until the release of Duelist Pack Legend Duelist 4. All of this archetype's members are attribute monsters, except for the Fire Black Rose Dragon and Ruddy Rose Dragon. The Design and Rose Dragon are dragon monsters of varying ages adorned with floral features of different colour rose species. This archetype focuses on synchro summoning both plant and dragon synchro monsters, along with controlling the field. Black Rose Dragon is a fire attribute dragon type synchro effect monster, level 7 with 2400 attack and 1800 defense. It requires a tuner plus one or more non-tuner monsters. And when this card is synchro summoned, you can destroy all cards on the field. Once per turn, you can banish one plant monster from your graveyard, then target one defense position monster your opponent controls, change that target to face-up attack position, and if you do, its attack becomes 0 until the end of this turn. This is a generic synchro monster that can be splashed into pretty much most types of decks, so long as you've got the tuners and the non-tuners to make the level 7, it's easy enough to do. It's often used for its first ability. As soon as it's synchro summoned, it just wipes out all cards on the field. Typically, you will have invested fewer resources in what you have already in your field, so getting rid of any existing cards isn't a problem. It's more devastating for the opponent as they watch and see all of their cards be destroyed by that effect. This secondary ability is really dedicated to a plant-based deck, and often players wouldn't use this type of effect, although they should keep in mind it's still quite decent. It forces an opponent's monster by banishing a plant monster from defense position into face-up attack position, and it loses all of its attack points. It comes straight to 0. This could be useful against certain decks that are very defensive-based, for example Subterras is just an example. There are probably other ones out there that might be better, but in doing so, zeroing out their attack points, this card can attack and do significant amounts of damage. The other thing you need to think about the destruction-based effect is that is actually optional, because it's you can destroy all cards. It's not you must. It's not a mandatory effect, as opposed to some other cards which say, such as the Jurak Meteor, as soon as this card is basically synchro summoned, you destroy everything. So you do have options for how to interact with this card. Blue Rose Dragon is a dark attribute dragon type level 4 with 1600 attack and 1200 defense. When this card on the field is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can target one Black Rose Dragon or one plant monster in your graveyard, special summon that monster. This card is designed really to either bring back your Black Rose Dragon in order for it to hopefully use its secondary ability, or it's used to find and recover a plant monster in the graveyard. It's decent enough for a consistency, and even for its attack points, 1600 isn't bad for a level 4. Crossroads Dragon is a dragon type link 2 effect monster. Its link points are the left and the bottom, and it has 800 attack points. It requires 2 monsters with different types, and during the main phase, as a quick effect, you can tribute this card and one plant monster, special summon one Rose Synchro monster or one plant Synchro monster from your etch deck. This is treated as a synchro summon. If a monster you control is destroyed by a card effect, while this card is in your graveyard, except during a damage step, you can banish this card, special summon one Rose Dragon monster from your graveyard. You can only use each effect of Crossroads Dragon once per turn. The summoning condition on this isn't too bad, as it just needs 2 monsters with different types. Within the deck, you'll be running both plants and dragons, so those meet those conditions. By tributing this card and one additional plant monster, you can special summon any Rose Synchro monster or a plant Synchro monster, and that gets treated as a synchro summon. So, long are the days where you have to have a specific requirement for a particular level. This just lets you cheat out either a plant synchro monster or a Rose Synchro monster without having to meet the level requirements. It's quite devastating, as if you have so many different options, and as the plant types keep getting extra deck monsters, that will make this effect even more destructive. When this card is in the graveyard, you can also banish this card to just special summon a Rose Dragon monster from your graveyard. This is a good way of reoccurring certain effects and to recover certain monsters to increase your field presence. I would ignore the fact it only has 800 attack points, as it's really used as synchro fodder for the higher level synchro monsters. Red Rose Dragon is a dark attribute dragon type tuner effect monster. It's a level 3 with 1000 attack and 1800 defense. If this card is sent to the graveyard as synchro material, you can special summon one Rose Dragon monster from your hand or deck, except Red Rose Dragon. Then if it was sent for the synchro summon of Black Rose Dragon or a plant synchro monster, you can also add one Frozen Rose or one Blooming of the Darkest Rose from your deck to your hand. You can only use this effect of Red Rose Dragon once per turn. This is a tuner for the archetype. The previous monster, which was the Blue Rose Dragon, was a level 4 monster, so it makes sense. The previous one is a level 4, this is level 3, that would make the level 7 Black Rose Dragon pretty quickly. When this card is sent to the graveyard as synchro material, you're able to just special summon a Rose Dragon monster from your hand or deck, except another version of itself. It means it can cheat out those cards much more quickly than if you had to have dedicated searches for the deck. And if this card was sent for the synchro summon of Black Rose Dragon or a plant synchro monster, you can search for one of those two specific cards, either the Frozen Rose or one of the Blooming of the Darkest Rose from the deck to your hand. These two cards will help to support how the deck likes to operate, and these searching cards are used after the fact of synchro summoning into Black Rose Dragon, so it's not that you have to give up this card beforehand. It's already had its use and it gets additional use in the future. Rox Rose Dragon is a dark attribute dragon type tuner effect monster. It's a level 3 with 1600 attack and 1200 defense. If this card is null or special summoned, you can add one card that specifically lists Black Rose Dragon in its text from your deck to your hand, except Rox Rose Dragon. While this card is in your graveyard, if a face Rose Dragon monster or plant synchro monster you control is destroyed by battle, or an opponent's card effect, you can add this card to your hand. You can only use each effect of Rox Rose Dragon once per turn. This is another tuner monster similar to the other one, but this has other aspects which make it more generic and actually better. When this card is null or special summoned, you can just add a card that has Black Rose Dragon listed in its text, so that it can be a spell, a trap, or another monster, and it's not limited to specific names of cards. And while this card is in the graveyard, provided a face-up Rose Dragon monster or plant synchro monster you control is destroyed by battle or an opponent's card effect, this card can reoccur and recover itself back to hand, and can be hopefully recycled without having to run additional forms of support. Ruddy Rose Dragon is a fire attribute dragon type synchro effect monster. It's level 10 with 3200 attack and 2400 defense. It requires a tuner plus one or more non-tuner monsters. If this card is synchro summoned, you can banish all cards from the graveyards. Then if this card was synchro summoned using a Black Rose Dragon or a plant synchro monster as material, you can destroy all other cards on the field. When your opponent activates a card or effect that would destroy a card, as a quick effect you can tribute this card, negate the activation, and then you can special summon one Black Rose Dragon from your extra deck or graveyard. This is the upgrade of the original Black Rose Dragon, and it makes sense considering we've got an upgrade for pretty much most of the Signer Dragons. We've got multiple upgrades for Jack Atlas, multiple upgrades for Yusei Fudo. I believe that Leo had the one upgrade that was shown within the Japanese kind of final arc of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds. We've had some sort of alternative version, not necessarily an upgrade of the Ancient Fairy Dragon for Luna, and we've also had an upgraded version of the Blackwing Dragon for Chrome. So it's justified that we get an upgraded version for Akiza. As soon as this card is synchro summoned, you are just able to banish all cards from the graveyard. That's yours and your opponent's, and if they've tried to set up their graveyard in a specific way, it'll often be very difficult for them to recover those cards. If this is then synchro summoned either using a Black Rose Dragon or a plant synchro monster as one of the materials, you're able to wipe out all other cards on the field. This is a more improved version of the Black Rose Dragon effect, because with that it just wipes out everything, including itself. It kind of has that self-destruction effect. This wipes out everything except itself, so worst case scenario, at least you've got this, which is a 3200 attack body on the field, and quite difficult for your opponent to instantly out, especially if they don't have many resources in their hand. As soon as your opponent activates a card or effect that would destroy a card, including Delph if it's threatened, by tributing this card, you negate that activation, and you can instantly substitute in a Black Rose Dragon. It can either come from the extra deck, and that means it gets summoned again, or you can choose it from the graveyard. It's a shame it doesn't say that this card summoned is treated as a synchro summon, otherwise that could use the effect of the Black Dragon as well. But I think that's wishful thinking and it's a bit too extensive. White Rose Dragon is a dark attribute dragon type level 4 with 1200 attack and 1000 defense. When this card is normal summoned, you can special summon one Rose Dragon monster from your hand or graveyard, except White Rose Dragon. You can only use each of these effects of White Rose Dragon once per turn. If you control a Dragon Tuner or a Plant Tuner, you can special summon this card from your hand. Or if this card is sent to the graveyard as synchro material, you can send one level 4 or higher plant monster from your deck to the graveyard. The first part of the effect, as soon as this card is normal summoned, you get to instantly special summon a Rose Dragon monster from either the hand or the graveyard. Since this is a level 4, if you can get out the level 3 Tuner monster, then you can synchro summon it into the Black Rose Dragon in the same turn. The other parts of the effects, provided you have a Dragon Tuner or Plant Tuner, you instantly get to special summon this card from your hand. Therefore, it works in both ways. This card is already kind of normal summoned onto the field, and then you can special summon a Rose Dragon from the hand or the graveyard. Or if you already have a Dragon Tuner or a Plant Tuner on the field, you can special summon this card as the additional extender. The other option is, if this card is sent to the graveyard as synchro material, you're able to pitch a level 4 or higher plant monster from your deck to the graveyard, in hopes for a Foolish Burial style effect to revive that through other means in the future. Garden Rose Maiden is a dark attribute plant type synchro effect monster. It's a level 5 with 1600 attack and 2400 defense. It requires a tuner plus one or more non-tuner monsters. And if this card is special summoned, you can add one Black Garden from your deck or graveyard to your hand. You can banish this card from your graveyard, then target one Rose Dragon monster or one Dragon Synchro monster in your graveyard, special summon it. You can only use each effect of Garden Rose Maiden once per turn. The summoning on this card is pretty easy as it's generic materials. And once this card is special summoned, so it can either be through its synchro summon or being revived from the graveyard, you can search for a Black Garden, which is a field spell which I think every time a monster is summoned to the field, its attack points become halved, and it generates a token on the opponent's side of the field which has 800 attack and defense. It also has an ability where you can scrap all the tokens that you have to revive a certain monster equivalent to the attack points of those monsters. So if you had 3 of those Rose tokens on your field, you could get rid of it alongside the field spell to bring back your Black Rose Dragon. By banishing this card from the graveyard, you can target a Rose Dragon monster or a Dragon Synchro monster in your graveyard, and it can be special summoned, so it also acts as a form of recovery. Azul Rose Shoot is a quick play spell card. The effect is to special summon Rose Dragon monster from your hand or graveyard in defense position. If this set card is destroyed, you can target one of your Black Rose Dragon or one monster that lists that card in its text that is banished or in your graveyard, special select. You can only use each effect of Basil Rose Shoot once per turn. First part of the effect lets you just special summon a Rose Dragon monster, be that from the hand or the graveyard in defense position, so it can help you set up for summoning one of your Black Rose Dragons. If it's set and it's destroyed, you can take one of your Black Rose Dragon or a monster that lists it in the card text that is either banished or in the graveyard, and that gets special summoned. So there are 2 ways you can play it. Pretty much you can either use it to summon a Rose Dragon instantly, or you can have your opponent waste a spell or trap destruction based effect on this card to bring back another card. It depends on how fast you want your interactions to become. White Rose Cloister is a field spell card. Its effect is, if you control no monsters, you can special summon one Rose Dragon monster or one plant monster from your hand. You can only use this effect of White Rose Cloister once per turn. During your draw phase, before you draw, you can declare one card type, monster, spell or trap. Reveal the top card of your deck, and if it is the declared card type, apply this effect for the rest of this turn, even if this card leaves the field. Level 7 or higher synchro monsters you control gain 1000 attack points. First bit of the effect, provided you have no monsters, you can straight away special summon a Rose Dragon monster or a plant monster from your hand. This is an instant access card and it's pretty easy to do so, and during your draw phase, before you draw, by declaring this specific card, if you get that right, a level 7 or higher synchro monsters you control gain 1000 attack points. So if you've got multiple on the field, they all gain 1000 additional attack points. It's for the Black Rose Dragon that will make it a 3400 attack monster. For the Ruddy Rose Dragon that will make it a 4300 attack monster. So you can close out games with these types of boosts, but it is extremely dependent on guessing correctly, and unless you are prepared to run cards that technically search the top of your opponent's deck, or you can stack it in a certain way, you can't guarantee that you're going to get into those cards. Another problem I see is there isn't really a downside of this, and actually to some extent that's a benefit, but it's a very minimalistic type of field spell. I much prefer the Black Rose Garden because I think that actually works quite well with the deck. This I think is themed on, there was a duel between Akiza and Crow versus Sherry LeBlanc near the end of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds in the Japanese part, and they were in this type of field, and the design was very much like a three-way duel. Black Crow's Moonlight Dragon is a light attribute dragon type synchro effect monster. It's a level 7 with 2400 attack and 1800 defense. It requires a tuner plus one or more non-tuner monsters, and if this card is special summoned or a level 5 or higher monster is special summoned to your opponent's field, target one special summoned monster you controls, return that target to the hand. You can only use this effect of Black Rose Moonlight Dragon once per turn. This card is able to summon itself pretty easily. It's generic materials and it's an alternative version of the Black Rose Dragon. As soon as this card is special summoned, so it can be through its initial synchro summon, or if it's revived from the graveyard through effects such as Monster Reborn, or if a level 5 or higher monster is special summoned to your opponent's field, you get to target a special summoned monster your opponent controls, and that gets returned to the hand. So it's like having a compulsory evacuation device in the form of a monster. It's a form of disruption which is sometimes better than being destroyed by a card effect, as certain cards trigger off from those abilities, and some monsters, more so nowadays, immune from being destroyed. Garden Rose Flora is a light attribute plant type synchro tuner effect monster. It's a level 5 with 800 attack and 1600 defense, and requires a tuner plus one or more non-tuner monsters. You can target one card in the field zone, destroy it, then special summon it to its controller's field. One Rose token plant dark level 2 with 800 attack and defense in attack position. Also, you cannot special summon monsters from the extract for the rest of this turn, except synchro monsters. You can only use this effect of Garden Rose Flora once per turn. Once per chain during your opponent's main phase, you can, as a quick effect immediately after this effect resolves, synchro summon using this card you control. This card is very generic to use, so it's not actually that bad, and even when you are destroying a card in your field zone, that's fine as it generates the token. When you've generated that token, since this is a tuner, you can really just go into your Black Rose Dragon through that effect, and this can be activated during your opponent's turn once per chain during their main phase. So they could have done a number of combinations, got out various cards, and then you can instantly synchro summon into the Black Rose Dragon and wipe out all of their cards and all of their hard work. It's like a junior version of the Garden Maiden. It's a smaller version of the same card. Muddy Rose Witch is a light attribute plant type tuner effect monster. It's a level 1 with 800 attack and 1700 defense. You can tribute this card to add one Witch of the Black Rose from your deck to your hand, and if you do, take one level 3 or lower plant monster from your deck and place it on top of your deck. Then immediately after this effect resolves, you can normal summon one Witch of the Black Rose from your hand. You can banish this card from your graveyard to return one of your Black Rose Dragon or Ruddy Rose Dragon that is banished or in your graveyard to the extra deck. You can only use each effect of Ruddy Rose Witch once per turn. This being a tuner monster means it's just accessible to bringing out some of your other various synchro monsters, including the Black Rose Dragon. By tributing this card, you can just add a Witch of the Black Rose from your deck to your hand, and actually its effect works where if it's searched for and drawn into, it gets to special summon itself onto the field. And then you can take a level 3 or lower plant monster from your deck and place it on top of your deck. That could be quite useful as it guarantees that those cards can resolve as and how they need to. And immediately after this effect resolves, by normal summoning the Witch of the Black Rose, that effect then triggers to draw into that particular card, which can then be summoned onto the field. You can banish this card from the graveyard just to return one of your Black Rose or Ruddy Rose Dragons that is banished on the graveyard back to the extra deck, so it does provide you with a little bit of utility and resource recovery. Black Garden is a field spell card. The effect is if a monster is normal or special summoned, face up, except by the effect of Black Garden, half its attack, then the controller of that monster special summons one Rose token Plant Dark level 2 with 800 attack and defense to their opponent's field in attack position. This attack loss remains even if this card leaves the field. You can target one monster in your graveyard with attack equal to the total attack of all plant monsters on the field, destroy this card and as many plant monsters on the field as possible, then if you destroyed all of them, special summon that targeted monster. The purpose of this card is as soon as a monster is normal special summoned, face up, its attack points are halved, and then the opponent just gets a rose token with the specific stats, 800 attack and defense, and that attack stat loss of the opponent's monster happens to remain. You can then target one monster in your graveyard with attack equal to the total attack of all plant monsters on the field. By destroying this card and those plant monsters, you're able to then revive that card. But it has to be exactly that attack points. Since these are 800 attack, so it have to be in multiples of 800, 1600, 2400, 3200. So those are the examples, and even up to 4000 it work, but I don't think there are too many 4000 attack monsters out there that would be able to be summoned through this effect, and that can just instantly be revived. It's a good way of stalling your opponent as well, as they cannot summon monsters that have decent attack points, as even the highest attack monsters will have their attack points halved. Blooming of the Darkest Rose is a normal trap card. Special summon rose tokens, these are plant dark level 2 with 800 attack and defense in defense position to either field up to the combined number of cards in the field zones and field spells in the graveyards. If this card is in your graveyard, you can target one Black Rose Dragon or one plant monster in your monster zone, banish it, and if you do, place this card on the bottom of the deck. During the next standby phase, return that banished monster to the field. You can only use this effect of Blooming of the Dark Rose once per turn. The first ability lets you special summon rose tokens equivalent to the number of field zones and field spells in the graveyards. The more you have, the more of these tokens you generate. These tokens can then be used as part of a synchro summon to bring out your Black Rose Dragon or one of the other plant synchro monsters that you wish to do so. If this card is in the graveyard, you can choose a Black Rose Dragon or a plant monster. In your monster zone, it gets banished, so that's fine as an effect, but it's not necessarily that great. This gets recovered to the bottom of the deck. It's not that easy to search for, but there are a couple of cards that work with that. And also, if you just shuffle your deck, this card will no longer remain on the bottom of the deck, so that's fine. And then during the next standby phase, you do get that banished monster to be returned. That can be useful for cards that have their effects that have been summoned negated, as those negations then get removed from those cards, as they're no longer treated in association with those previous cards. Think of it a bit like Interdimensional Matter Transporter, or its newest version, which is the Interdimensional Matter Transport Forward. Frozen Rose, it's a quick play spell card. The effect is to send one face-up monster you control to the graveyard. Apply this effect depending on the type it had on the field. A plant, during the end phase of this turn, you can draw 2 cards, then discard 1 card. Or a non-plant, add 1 level 4 or lower plant monster from your deck to your hand. You can only activate 1 Frozen Rose per turn. The first effect on this card requires you to send a face-up monster you control to the graveyard, and depending on its typing will determine its effect. If it happens to be a plant, at the end phase you get to draw 2 cards and then discard 1. This is technically a negative 1 in terms of effects, because you have to send a face-up monster to the graveyard, you have to activate this card, and you also have to discard. So you are losing 3 cards to bring 2 cards, so it's always going to be a -1. That's a bit of a disappointment, but I suppose it depends on how you are within the duel, whether you need those desperation on those drawing those 2 cards to make a difference in the game state. If it's a non-plant, you get to add a level 4 or lower plant monster from your deck to your hand, which I think is probably the more ideal situation, and works well with the Rose Dragons, which happen to have dragon types attached to them. Thorn of Malice is a equipped spell card. Equip only to Black Rose Dragon or a plant monster. It gains 600 attack. If the equipped monster attacks a defense position monster, inflict piercing battle damage to your opponent. If the equipped monster attacks a monster after damage calculation, that attacked monster loses 600 attack and defense. An opponent's monster that battles with the equipped monster cannot be destroyed by that battle. This was just actually seen within a duel between, I think it was Akiza versus Yusei Funo, in that Akiza equipped this to the Black Rose Dragon. It was stronger than the Stardust Dragon and would continually beat on the Stardust Dragon and inflict real psychic damage to Yusei. This is quite versatile, as it can not only equip itself to a Black Rose Dragon, but it can also equip to any plant monsters you have. The 600 point attack boost is okay, and it can inflict piercing battle damage if necessary. It also keeps your opponent's monsters around, And to most people, that might seem a bad thing, as, you know, you want to be able to get rid of your opponent's monsters. But that doesn't matter. If you can keep attacking into that monster, it keeps losing 600 attack and defense points. As you slowly chip away at it, it's going to get to a point where it's 0 attack and defense. And so it'll be up to your opponent to try and get rid of that monster as quick as possible. Otherwise, they're going to be taking the same as having a direct attack, and it doesn't matter if that monster is in attack or defense position. It's quite an impressive card, and I can see why it's been run. There are actually other cards which have been added and featured within Akiza's deck, but those are actually in a wider range of cards. Some of them aren't even specifically cards. For example, you've got Lord Poison, which is a very old card. You've got Twilight Rose Knight, and you have other ones, but this pretty much covers most of the Rose cards as of themselves. I will be making a separate video with the other Rose cards attached, and those will have cards which just feature Rose in their name. So there's actually some cards that have Rose as part of their naming, which isn't as such part of this archetype. But I will also make a separate video with just inclusive of every Rose card that is specific to Akiza. Make sure to look out for that. If you can like the video, I'd really appreciate it. It helps to spread it to new audiences. And if you can subscribe, that would also be great. Thank you. So that you don't miss out on another one of these videos.